Hello everyone, welcome to the Tech Podcast series. This is Lakshit Pan from Azure Developer Community, and we are back here again with another episode of the Tech Podcast series. This this episode is very special because this episode is going to be a part of Code Without Barrier initiative that we are driving here in India after a successful launch in Singapore. So this Code Without Barrier initiative is primarily focuses on women in tech. We are helping all the industry females to get into tech if they want a career transition. We are helping all the way out with our mentorship circles and multiple industry leaders who are always there to help you out. And for today's podcast we have you know our business leader Trina Das here. She's a tech innovator. She has been founding leading a tech startup, and has been very super successful in that industry. She is a Forbes 30 under 30 Asia. She has been championed alternative educational models, and impacting thousands globally, right? So she's the best person to guide you around what's going in the market. We will try to learn from her experience how she's doing so much work at one point of time, and we'll try to explore. So let's start with a quick introduction of Trina. If you could introduce yourself for our audience first.
Hi, thanks, Laksh. I think we are very glad that Microsoft is doing this podcast. I think it will help a lot of leaders, specifically women leaders and women trying to explore opportunities and career in the field of technology. It's going to be really helpful for them, and I hope that a lot more people should be following it. So thank you for having me. I'd like to give you a very quick introduction. So I am Trina Das. I have always been an entrepreneur my entire life. I started my first business when I was in college as a tuition teacher, teaching like a very small group of students just to make some pocket money. Over the next 1 year, I grew it to more than 1,800 students. While still in college, I was making like 8 to 10 lakhs a month, which was pretty crazy. And I realized my business streak, and I started expanding my centers. With my father's help, I started like a business entity, and I started expanding through the franchise route. In the next 2 years, I actually ended up building 86 centers across 8 countries, and we made like a lot of money. But then I realized that what started as a dream as a founder to help children do better in their board exams suddenly got diluted with a lot of other teachers being in my place and teaching the students, and I was not able to accept that as a founder, particularly when I was recognized in the White House by President Barack Obama in the year 2015. I knew in my heart that I need to do something better, something bigger. That's when I sold my first company, and I started the second company in education. And parallelly, I also started working in the HR field, right? So I have always been an impact entrepreneur. I come from a computer science engineering background, and I have also done my management from Harvard. So I have got very diverse experience, first working in the field of edtech, and then enterprise tech, where we have scaled it to more than 3 million in monthly revenues. And we have also partnered with hundreds of enterprises, in fact all major enterprises in India. And I think all this gave me a lot of diverse experience. In fact, I'm now starting a consumer tech venture. So I think, so I think I've got a lot of diverse experience to speak to you about technology leadership.
Wow, such a great experience you have, and the numbers that you mentioned are pretty crazy, right? And when I was exploring your profile, right, I was going through your profile to prepare some of the talking points that we could discuss about. I was like, how she has done so much great work, and how did she get the time, right? We'll discuss about that later. I have so much things to ask for, right? But starting from the very first point, right? Stick it to from a PM perspective, because right now I've heard multiple replications. Suddenly the project management is in the hype, right? Post COVID, and these couple of after these post 3 years after COVID, right? So you have been a skilled manager of it, whether it's your time or it's your it's startup, right? I just wanted to know What's the tactical definition of a project management, and how do you see it from an industry per se?
Absolutely. I think project management is all about delivering a project within a certain time frame, ensuring that you have the right resources. So even before you start managing a project, you need to be sure that you have an idea about what are the expectations or the goal outcome that you want to achieve. And then I personally always work backwards from there. Sometimes in a startup you don't have enough time, and any like sane person will tell you that this is impossible. You definitely need more time to get that project done, or you need more resources, because as startup we are always competing with large companies and with very minimal resources or a very lean team, right? So when you are managing a project, I think going beyond as a leader, and as a startup leader, you need to go beyond sane thinking, sometimes be completely insane, and start with the goal in mind and then work backwards. It doesn't matter what and how impossible the goal might seem, as long as you can feel the goal inside your mind, and if you can believe in yourself that you will do it, it just happens and it always works.
So, when as you mentioned about from a business person, as a leadership per se, I wanted to know what does there any definition of a business leader, right? What does a business leader looks like? And you have been an entrepreneur from very young age, right? You have been facilitating all these college students, right, from tuition, and no one could ever think of making that kind of revenue, or that kind achieve that kind of numbers that you did from a tuition perspective, and scaling, and even then scaling a tuition, maybe what I'd say tuition, maybe the business to a startup level, then to all many these countries globally. This is a pretty that's something very phenomenal, right? How do you see this, and what is the definition that you think that could facilitate the young leaders?
That's a very interesting question. I think that um, you can define a leader as someone who has a following. Even if one person follows you, you are a leader, right? So it all matters, how much impact you are creating on someone else's lives, and if somebody is willing to follow you. To do that, essentially you need to have a confidence in your own self, and you also need to be true to who you are, because if you are not true to yourself, nobody else will be. And as a leader, if you truly want someone to believe in you and to believe in the goal that you're wanting to achieve, you definitely have to build that trust, right? You need to create that safe environment for someone to join you and to feel protected in your presence. I think that is the essence of being a leader. And I think that comes naturally to women in general. We are very nurturing, very caring, and we are very compassionate. So I think we have those natural, inclination to be a leader, I would say, more than the male counterpart, but somehow that's not recognized as much. So I think it's going to be advantageous for women trying to take leadership positions if we are truly embracing who we are, rather than trying to copy a leader, or to try to be someone we are not. If we are true to who we are, we will always have a following who would come to support our dreams, our goals, and I think that is what we should be as a leader.
Yeah, and when, as you mentioned earlier, right, you have scaled HR tech startup that you mentioned, the tech startup that you were working on to $3 million, right? And again, that is bootstrap, right? Entirely bootstrap. So what do you think, what would have worked out, if one will see your profile, or maybe your work that you have done, it looks like that you are living a perfect human being life that one could wonder, right? In every aspect. So this doesn't really happen. So I just wanted to know, what does your background reflects from a true definition, and how do you see this happening?
Okay, so basically, look, my life is definitely not perfect. I'll tell you. I mean, it looks very glamorous from the outside because you don't know the kind of work we put in, the amount of sleep time I get per day. It's crazy. Like, I sometimes sleep for 4 hours, and I have to be perfectly going, appearing anywhere with full energy, even if I haven't slept for one day, right? So that is the kind of commitment that I have to give, and there is always a part of you that you have to sacrifice in order to get something bigger. And all startup founders, I mean, I won't believe if somebody says something else, but you have to definitely sacrifice your your other, enjoyments and everything else to do something meaningful, right? So that part of me is not perfect at all. I mean, I'm still far away from having a perfect life, because I believe that we all have much more potential than what we are doing right now. But when it comes to scaling my business to more than 3 million in MRR, I can tell you that, it all comes back to the very basic. Like, do you really understand who your customers are, who your user is, and are you really solving a problem? So, if you just think from that angle and remove all the other jargons that you have, in every other dictionary, it doesn't matter. As long as you understand who your user are, and if you are solving their problem, you will always have those users lining up to you, because somebody, they won't find that solution anywhere else. So that's, I think, the basics, and if you're doing that, you will always scale.
And how had you, led it to multiple countries? Like expanding globally is not a very, it's not a cheese walk, right? And expanding it to multiple countries, and again, these countries are something, these are, in somewhat sense, these are not that much tech savvy, or these are not that much, resource savvy, I would say, right? There are not that much resources available in those countries. So how did you got, how these connections work? What is the first step that you see of, when you thought first time of expanding?
So I'll just give you a bit of background. So when I started my franchising model, I had no global exposure. Like, not just me, nobody from my family had went outside India, right? I mean, like my father, mother, and like closest family. So I had no idea how like the world outside India really looked like. But in 2013, I was invited by Forbes for the first time in the US to speak at New York Stock Exchange. And also, it was an event by EOGACA, which is like a global student entrepreneurship competition, where I was given the stage at New York Stock Exchange, and that was my first international trip. I was blown away by the potential the world has and the kind of connections I made, because nobody was selected from my country or even Asia like to be in the top 5 in that competition, but I somehow made it because of my revenues. So I got a lot of incoming requests from people in the audience who were from different countries and stuff, and I used that opportunity to build connections. And I have always tried to help people, irrespective of I saw any business help from them immediately, and I always kept on adding to what I can do for others, right? And that slowly opened up to possibilities in the in the coming months, when people started telling me that if they can take my business into their country. And we came up with like a financial structure based on people's budget and the kind of time and resources they had. And we made our first franchisee outside India. I think it was in Zimbabwe. And from there we never looked back, because when we made that successful, the second franchisee owner, who was the friend of that first franchisee owner and came from Zambia, wanted to take it. And then we expanded to 6 African countries. So it just happens, when you are creating a network, and when you are empowering and helping your network in every way you can. When I started making network, I had nothing, I had no money, no I had I was making revenues, but I didn't have that much power or anything that could actually help in the terms of the kind of help people normally expect. But I was still doing things. I would suggest people something that I would connect someone in my network to someone else who I felt could be useful. Just doing these small things multiplies and comes back to you in ways that has always surprised me. So I think, yeah, so I think making network and continuously helping people opens up doors in many
Now,
ways. Yeah.
by this statement, everyone listening to this podcast would get a point why we are doing so much, work for free at Azure Developer Community. These initiatives are really worth it, but we are definitely putting a lot of time and efforts to, do all these offline meetups, online meetups, just to educate you people, just so that you can be benefited. Just one part, when the 1% gets, even we get success 1%, our work is job is done. Now, talking about, Trina, about your business, your schooling, your from your education purpose, you have also made it to Harvard Business School. And for someone, I just really wanted to know, like, how has been your experience, and what's the best part of being a Harvard scholar?
So I'll tell you something. So when I think Harvard experience was life changing for me, and in ways you can't even imagine. So when I was in my college and when I was making, like, 8 to 10 lakh rupees in a month while still in college, I that was like more than some of my, like, in fact all of my professors and even the dean of the college was making right at that time. So I was in the air as a student, right? Because I was like having very early success and I was like, I am doing amazing. But when I went to Harvard, for the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who were smarter than me. So I had like one of my classmates who was doing like 1,000 crore revenues. So I was like, oh my God, this is even possible. Before that, I would always have the mindset of existing in a market. Like, if I'm existing in a market and making decent money, that was successful business for me. But when I came to Harvard, I realized that just existing doesn't, like, that's not my potential. I have to dominate a market or I have to capture a market, right? So my perspective changed. One, I have become very humble as a person because I realized that I am capable of much more than what I'm doing now. And when you consider from the country perspective, like as India, we are far behind what other entrepreneurs in other countries are doing, right? So we have that responsibility in us. And I think that is something that Harvard has done for me. And it's life changing. I mean, after Harvard, the kind of scale I have achieved in my business and the quality of products I have released is next level. So I would highly, highly recommend anyone, if you can, invest in yourself, invest in your personal development, and surrounding you with people who are far more successful than you is super important. So yeah.
I 100% agree, because so the environment really matters, right? And you the exposure that you get from, these people, and the network that you have, right? These things really help you, or maybe makes you a really good people, and whatever the future
Yeah.
self is really, sorted right now. From a from HR's perspective, I really wanted to know, because you have been the, jack of this trade as well. How do you see, if our, there are multiple, generative AI pitching in right now, and I see a lots of significance here, but I would like to know, what are your thoughts about AI that's touching almost every sector in the industry, and how do you see this, and what are the probable significance of AI in maybe the probable HR sector? Because I can see some of the AI products that are not kind of replacing, but adding, just eliminating a layer of human interviews. So suppose if there are three human based interviews, now there are only one, because the rest two layers have been eliminated by AI, right? So how do you see this? What are the significance that you think, and does this make sense to you?
So honestly, I think HR has come a long way in like sorry, AI with HR is like, coming a long way. But I feel that it's far from the dream that I would still want to achieve. Like, for me, the dream HR system would be someone who can, like, interview people in my place and can perfectly select, and like next, like on the day of joining, they just show up. And I think we are still not there, and it's far away from that. But I think AI, seeing it from the so basically there are some areas where humans are doing better than AI, of course, because we have our advantages, but there are some parts which are not possible for human beings to do accurately because of our own limitations. I think those parts AI um, helps a lot. And AI also um, kind of like adds up to our overall screening and interviewing process, helps us to streamline things and save our time in many ways. So I do think that AI speeds up, but the dream HR software which we all want is still far away, and we are going there, and it will take, I think, 10-20 years. I think it's far away. Yeah.
Okay, okay. And now, because you have a great social presence, right? I would like to know, how do you see the significance of all these social platforms? Like, is there any benefit of being active, or being being present on these social media platforms that are there in the in the industry? Like, suppose, let's take an example of LinkedIn or so, which are very highly professional in some sense. Uh, is there any what benefits that these provides? Do you think?
Yes, absolutely. So basically, you have to, so in today's world, you have to be present where your users are and where your, where the crowd is. Because if you're doing something and if you want to reach out to, people to know about your impact, being on social media is like a no brainer, right? But for me, I haven't done that much for myself. Whatever following you see of mine on LinkedIn and whatever, I've not been very active in social media. I am lucky that because of my work from my past, people are still following me. I think I should become much more active. But yeah, you should definitely be active.
Wow. And how to, if you will say, because you have been in that global exposure, right? I would like to know how to connect with global communities, because as you have earlier said, right, you get if you expand your exposure, if you expand your network, you really get multiple, when you talked about the revenue part, right, you said, mentioned it clear, like 1,000 crore revenue that guy was making, right? So how to get those exposure, and how to connect with those? Is there any portal? Is there maybe how to get into those? Is there any other platforms that one could dive in, or how to see this?
So, look, when you're starting, you would always find it difficult to become part of communities. For example, before going into the Harvard community, I didn't have that background, right? I was not coming from a very well known university. So, before you make it a part of a community, you will always feel like, outside, like a certain group of people, and you will find yourself hard to be there. But as you keep working on yourself and on a particular direction, you would slowly start exceeding everyone else in that direction, and it doesn't take so much time. It just feels like we will take like a lot of time to excel in a particular direction. But if you're actually doing it, and if you're doing it consistently with focus, I think it actually doesn't take that much time. So if you're working in a particular direction, and if you are improving yourself continuously, you will suddenly become the person that the communities want you to be a part of. For example, I actually never nominated, for many things. Like, for example, I never nominated myself for the Barack Obama recognition. That's like insane. I mean, imagine I coming from nowhere, getting invited to the White House, and I had no idea of how it happened. Like, I have no idea. So that is something that, doesn't happen by planning. You just have to do what you can do best. You just have to continuously improve, and you will not even realize when you become world's best. So the way communities work, is basically you have to meet certain standards to become a part of the community. If you plan it the other way around, that okay, I want to be into the Forbes 30 under 30, what can I do to become a part of it? You'll never be there. But if you're
Right.
working on your goal, similarly for money, if you have a target of making $1 million in a year, and if you're just focusing on that and working on that, it doesn't happen like that. But if you're working on something meaningful, if you're solving problems, if you're working in a certain direction, you will get, like, you will not just get that, but many other things with that when you haven't even planned. So I would say that it's magical, and I don't know exactly how it works, but it always, you will have communities opening up for you if you're doing the right
Wow.
thing.
Wow, getting so many insights. And having said that, because we have a paucity of time and we can't cover all the questions that I have, so I'll just, with this final note, I would really like to know, like, what are your matrices of success? Like, what success looks like to you?
Okay. So for me, what truly matters is if I could create an impact. So I'm an impact entrepreneur. And what matters for me is if I could change or make somebody else's life better. and nothing gives me more happiness than, like, if somebody is using what I've built and if that is making him better in certain ways. So that's the only thing I care about.
Wow. And any final note or piece of advice you want to share with our community members, those who are listening to this podcast?
Yes, of course. So basically, I think the world is changing significantly right now. I mean, we are seeing unprecedented change right now with the advent of AI and the potential the current technologies hold. There has been never a better time for women to venture into the field of technology, and the kind of impact our feminine qualities can bring to this masculine world. I think you should definitely jump into technology and use your leadership to propel this forward. We need more leaders for sure. And we definitely need more women leaders. And I would love Microsoft to continue with this initiative and to keep building, like, women leaders with your, like, inspiring podcasts. Thank you.
Thank you for giving those kind insights. And to everyone, I hope you got some really good insights from the experience of Trina that she brings through. So, thank you for listening to this podcast. We are coming up with lots of initiatives. Just stay tuned and keep healthy. Thank you, everyone, for joining in. Thank you, Trina, for joining us for this podcast. It was my pleasure to host you. Thank you.
Same here. Thank you, Lakshmi.